Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a Watchman Newscast live stream. Apologies that we were pushed back a little bit on time. Had some very important meetings related to the upcoming launch of my brand new show, Stakelbeck Tonight, debuting March 25th on TBN, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and then again at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time every night, Monday through Friday. Stakelbeck Tonight. Hey, if you like the Watchmen, you will love our brand new daily program debuting on TBN March 25th. Again, it's been a crazy time here in Dallas, Fort Worth, as we prepare for the launch of the show. Some important meetings I was just in, but rest assured, good stuff coming your way on a nightly basis, launching again March 25th. The show is called Stakelbeck Tonight for such a time as this. And part of my production trip to Israel last week was getting content for the brand new show. Hey, first of all, let's do a little bit of a debrief on last week and what I saw in Israel, that on the ground perspective that I believe sets our channel apart. But secondly, what's happening right now today. We want to get into, in particular, the northern border. Once again, the threat from the north, a lethal Hezbollah attack today on northern Israel. One Israeli soldier killed. So we've got to talk about that as well as we move into what I believe is a prophetic great northern war that could be sooner rather than later. And it's not if, but when. That's what we're talking about when we talk about this major confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah coming, folks. And when I'll break it down for you, what I saw, what I felt when I was right along, I should say, not just near the northern border last week, the Israel-Lebanon border. So we want to talk about that. And did you see this footage of Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, I should say, who was really the mastermind behind the October 7th massacre? Israel captured footage of him scurrying like a rat through the tunnels beneath Gaza in Khan Yunis. He was with his family, and he was caught on camera in a tunnel there in Khan Yunis. What would his soon demise? And look, I expect that Israel is going to get a bead on Sinwar. They already, look, it seems that they're just missing him. He's in a tunnel, then the IDF a day later is in that very same tunnel that he was just in. So I think it's a matter of time before Sinwar is brought to justice one way or the other. What do you think? I'm going to get your thoughts here. We have a very lively chat right now here on the stream. What do you all think about the end of Sinwar and the end of the war? Meaning, if Sinwar is taken out, how big of a blow is that? It's obviously a blow to Hamas, but is it the kind of complete morale-crushing blow where people literally lay down their weapons in Hamas and say, wow, it's really over now. Now Sinwar is dead. It's really over. Is he that important, in your view, to Hamas and their overall strategy, seeing as though, I should say, he was one of the main masterminds and architects of the October 7th massacre? Does his demise mean this war is over sooner? I guess that's my overarching question. Let me know what you think. And let me just preface it all by saying Israel is making incredible, incredible strides in Gaza. You're not hearing about it in the mainstream media, surprise, surprise, but you're hearing it right here on The Watchman. In talking to the IDF last week, IDF officials, spokespeople, Israeli officials, I don't want to say they're surprised. They knew that the IDF would succeed. It's a great fighting force, but perhaps surprised at just how swiftly. And look, with, I don't want to say minimum casualties to Israel, to the IDF, but many were predicting maybe thousands of casualties. We're not seeing that. We're seeing a little, I think it's around 230 right now. And folks, any casualty is horrific. Not downplaying it one bit. Any death is horrible. But I think perhaps many thought that Israel would suffer greater casualties in this war. Some were talking about Gaza being a quagmire for the IDF back in October before Israel went in on the ground, but that hasn't been the case. And look, within 4 months, we've seen Gaza City fall. We've seen Khan Yunis fall. They're the two largest cities in Gaza, and they were the main Hamas strongholds. And fallen to the tune of over 10,000 Hamas jihadis killed. many more taken off the battlefields, gravely wounded. So look, the IDF has made great strides. There's much more work to be done. And Israeli officials have said, look, this is going to be long term. Even when the major operations stop, there will be an IDF presence clearly in Gaza. There's got to be a buffer zone between Israel and Gaza. A lot going into this, but the main, and I don't want to say final battle, but the main obstacle still to Israel saying, okay, this thing is really essentially under control, and Hamas is largely defanged and defeated. And with the ultimate end game, right, of Hamas not posing any sort of significant threat to Israel ever again. And by the way, Hamas's rocket arsenal has just diminished massively. I get alerts on my phone when Hamas is firing rockets. It hasn't been much in recent days and weeks. From time to time, Hamas still will reach central Israel and Tel Aviv, I'm sad to say, and points beyond. But folks, those rocket launches are becoming few and far between out of Gaza, whereas before they were every day, all day. Now, I do get alerts frequently about rockets and missiles coming from the north, from Lebanon, which we'll talk about in a minute. But shouldn't this be talked about more other than here on the Watchman and some other channels? I mean, shouldn't the mainstream media be talking about these great strides made by the IDF in Gaza? And what I was going to say before I got off a little bit there, talking about the rockets, Rafah is the last stronghold along the Egypt border where Hamas may very well be making its last stand. We'll talk about that more in a minute as well. But folks, shouldn't the mainstream media be talking about this more? Think about this. In the span of about 4 months, it's just over 4 months. Today is February 14th, Valentine's Day. October 7th was the massacre. So a little over 4 months, 4 months and a week. The IDF has conquered Gaza City and Khan Yunis, which were absolute Hamas strongholds. I mean, these were booby-trapped, just terror strongholds to the max with labyrinths of tunnels, this spiderweb type labyrinth or interconnected series of tunnels beneath the Gaza Strip, Israel destroying many of those tunnels. But Gaza City and Khan Yunis have fallen to the IDF, and Rafah will be Hamas's last stand. Israel's done it with a relatively low number of casualties, considering the magnitude of the task. Hamas leaders have been killed, not Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Daif, who are the main big fish that Israel needs to eliminate, but the rocket launches have slowed to a trickle. I mean, call me crazy, but these are major, major strides and achievements on the part of the Israel Defense Forces in just over 4 months. And let's be honest, many were not predicting this. Many were predicting a long, drawn-out campaign with heavy, heavy IDF casualties. We haven't seen that. And when Hamas talks about Gazan casualties, by the way, two things to remember. Number one, or when you see Palestinian casualties reported, number one, the IDF goes to extraordinary lengths, and we've detailed it here in the newscast time and time again, to avoid civilian casualties, to the point where, folks, I'm sad to say, but I think it's a fact that Israelis would agree with as well. If Israel wasn't so concerned, and I'd say preoccupied with avoiding civilian casualties, then less Israeli soldiers would have died in this war, no doubt. But Israel says, you know what, this is who we are. And we are going to, at great costs, including to ourselves, try everything we can to avoid civilian casualties, even though, as everyone watching knows, look, war is a nasty, horrible business. Civilians have been killed in wars since the dawn of time. Again, I'm sad to say, but this is the situation, and this is the situation that Hamas has put Gazan civilians in. Listen, Hamas, part of its war strategy, folks, is to use civilians as human shields. That's why it positions rocket launchers in schools, playgrounds, hospitals, and military assets in these civilian targets, intentionally using civilians as human shields. I don't know that we've seen this in the history of warfare, though, where an entity that's at war is just all in on using civilians as human shields to the point where it is a main pillar of their strategy. But we see that from the likes of radical Islam, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. We saw it with ISIS as well in Iraq and Syria. Civilians as human shields again and again and again. Despite all of this, despite Hamas, key point here, launching this war, some seem to have forgotten, especially here in the West where I'm sitting. Hamas launched this war on October 7th. Hamas invaded Israel. Yes, invaded southern Israel on October 7th and butchered 1,200 people while they slept, some of them, many of them. At 6:30 a.m. it all started off that day. So Israel, in its response, keyword there, response to a Hamas invasion, has still gone to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties, even though Hamas, again, is putting civilians front and center, right out there. I mean, I think this should be studied. Not only should the mainstream media, and they're not going to, but in a perfect world, the mainstream media, all media outlets would be talking about this. Number one, the great achievements of the IDF in this war. Number two, the IDF's the inherent humanity of the Israel Defense Forces. I'm sure we'll have some trolls pop up on the chat with the rhetoric, the anti-Israel rhetoric, saying Israel's committing genocide. Well, if Israel's committing genocide, that's very interesting. This is the only genocide I've ever seen. And some will say Israel's been committing genocide since 1948. If that's the case, this is the first genocide in world history where the supposed victims of that genocide, their population is growing by leaps and bounds. A funny thing how that works. The Palestinian population has, no pun intended, exploded since 1948. Again, I mean, the numbers are astronomical. Have they grown? In the millions. How could you have that on one hand and a genocide on the other hand? It kind of doesn't add up. But someone explain that if there is a troll here. I mean, trolls, you're my guest, but because that just doesn't, I wasn't very good at math, I'll admit. But it doesn't seem to add up if you are committing genocide and wiping a people intentionally off the earth, as Israel's being charged, scandalously being charged in some quarters, then how is that very population growing over the years, decade after decade? Very interesting. Speaking of which, the second point here, when we're talking civilian casualties, and again, the mainstream media, I hate to continue to hit them with a cudgel and to beat them over the head, but it's rather infuriating that when the mainstream media, excuse me, reports on this war, they continuously say 28,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. They conveniently leave out a very important point, context, I should say. The Palestinian Health Ministry, which is sharing these supposed numbers, is run by Hamas. So when you see civilian casualty numbers, remember two things. First, those are the Hamas numbers. I don't know, perhaps they're inflating them. Secondly, those casualty numbers, and the media is not saying this, they don't include this in the report, those casualty numbers include Hamas fighters who've been killed. And there's at least 10,000 of those deceased Hamas jihadists. So that number is part of the overall casualty number that the Hamas-run, key point, Palestinian Health Ministry shares with the world. Man, I'm so glad we have this channel and that God has given us this platform for such a time as this, so we can correct the record. And in a time where common sense is not so common, where, as the prophet Isaiah very accurately described, good is called evil and evil is called good. That's the times you're in right now, folks. These are Bible times. These are prophetic times, no doubt. I'm honored and I'm privileged that God Almighty has given us a platform here we have thousands of people watching right now. We'll have thousands more before we're done. We have nearly, by the grace of God, 1 million subscribers now on this channel. If you have not subscribed, hey, be sure to subscribe, click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We'd love to have you here every day as watchmen and women on the wall. But what an honor and a privilege and a heavy charge, because there's so much misinformation, disinformation, outright slander against Israel right now, that friends of Israel like myself, when we have a platform to get the truth out there, man, we're going to take it. We have to live up to that duty, that call that God has given us, and we're able to do that on this channel. So I feel a real responsibility, folks, to do exactly that and set the record straight. So there you have it, some record setting that we just laid out for you. But keep all those things in mind as you watch this all unfold in Gaza. And hey, during my time in Israel last week, we were there for a week, a great production trip, getting content again for not only for the Watchmen, but for Stakelbeck Tonight, our brand new show launching March 25th on TBN. In case you missed it earlier on, I talked about it. 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, twice every night from Monday through Friday, launching March 25th, Stakelbeck Tonight. But in the course of getting content for the brand new show last week, we were on the Gaza border. And how do I describe it? We were in Be'eri, Kibbutz Be'eri, which is really the epicenter. And we're getting to the north and Hezbollah in a minute, but I wanted to share this with you. Kibbutz Be'eri, the epicenter, at least 95 people slaughtered on October 7th, others taken away hostage, many more wounded. It looked like a tornado hit it. Hamas burnt down houses, folks. It was rubble and devastation that would disturb you to your core. But we were there, and we were also at the site of the Nova Music Festival, where 364 mostly young people were slaughtered in cold blood on that fateful day. And what did I feel? I feel a tremendous sadness and heaviness on one hand, no doubt. But two things. First, my team and I prayed. We prayed at those sites. The land was defiled. That ground was defiled by walking demons on October 7th, a demonic death cult. That's what Hamas is, clearly. That ground was completely desecrated and defiled. The Holy Land was desecrated and defiled, a chunk of the Holy Land, southern Israel. We prayed over that land and rededicated that land to the Lord, and that was very important. So on one hand, I felt the heaviness, I felt the devastation, the despair, I felt it, I saw it. But on the other hand, hey, we went in, we said, God, this is still your land, and we're going to just pray over it and reclaim it for the Lord as believers. But also, not only in southern Israel, but you need to know this, folks, as you're praying right now for Israel and you're praying for the way forward, know that the people in Israel right now are resilient. I have to say, the resiliency, the unity, the morale was very high. Hey, everyone's traumatized from the mini Holocaust that just happened 4 months ago. This was 9/11 many times over for Israel. It was a mini Holocaust, the greatest slaughter of the Jewish people since World War II. The people are traumatized still. But morale was high. And there was a spirit about the people of Israel and a determination to see the job through, and a righteous anger in that they're saying, hey, you know what? We were attacked. We were invaded on October 7th. And now we respond and we seek to wipe out the people who seek to wipe us out, and we're the bad guys. We're fighting with one arm tied behind our back, largely because of the Biden administration's demands and Europe's demands. We're trying everything we can to avoid civilian casualties in the most densely packed strip of land on earth, the Gaza Strip. And Hamas is using civilians willfully as human shields. No one has ever fought a war like this, I think, in at least a modern warfare, to this degree. This war will be studied, I believe, by military strategists for years to come. And guess what? Israel is going to come out of it looking pretty darn good in the eyes of history. I don't know how much history we have left. I think the days are short. But Israelis are saying, we were butchered. This was a Holocaust. We are very justified to respond and do what we're doing right now. And the world's piling on us. Hey, listen, days, and I mean days after October 7th. A week hadn't even gone by. In a matter of days, we saw these large anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas marches in Western cities. Israel hadn't even gone in on the ground yet into Gaza. The blood was still fresh on the ground when these protests against Israel and in support of Hamas started right here in the West. And now that Israel is ready to finish the job, go into Rafah, the last Hamas stronghold, and root out these evil demonic forces, the world is saying to Israel, no, 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 no. You have to stop. You can't do this. You must leave Hamas alive to fight another day. And I have to tell you, folks, I don't see that happening, because the Israelis I talk to, from officials, military, political officials, to the average people on down, are saying, we're in this, man. We are going to crush these evil forces that want to crush us. I mean, there is resiliency and unity. And I have to tell you, there's a turning to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, among many Israelis who are asking what it's all about right now. And Generation Z here in the United States, where I'm coming to you from, look, has its issues. I'll just say that. I've young daughters, who are good girls, thank God, good kids, but many in the younger generation in the United States, on a variety of reasons, and I'll get into this on the new nightly show, Stakelbeck Tonight, have a lot of issues and problems. Generation Z in Israel, on the other hand, not without its problems, clearly. It's the iPhone generation. But folks, this is a different level of maturity among the kids over there who are fighting in the trenches and the tunnels, nose to nose against Hamas right now for their very existence. I say all that to say I'm very impressed by the younger generation in Israel and what I saw on the ground. Very impressed. And this is a strong young generation. Look, not without its faults. And it's not immune to the madness that Generation Z in America and Europe are dealing with right now. But the character of these young people in Israel is very, very impressive. That's another takeaway. And the biggest takeaway, I think, other than in many cases, I think Israelis are open to the gospel right now, increasingly, and certainly open to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for starters, no doubt. But the other big takeaway would be the coming war to the north. And that might have been the biggest takeaway from my trip. I explained to you a minute ago that while down south along the Gaza border, yes, I felt spiritual heaviness. Absolutely. I felt the evil that was perpetrated there. You could feel it in the air, and the sounds of war, gunshots, explosions were thick. The air was thick with those sounds the entire time we were down south, right over the border. I heard it all. But there was also the optimism of, hey, we're reclaiming the land, we're reconsecrating this land. There were young people coming in the military, going in to fight. We're going to do this. We're going to finish the job. Up north, I don't want to describe it as a feeling of dread, but a big one is coming. And if you've been watching this newscast for the past few years, we've called it the Great Northern War. It's at the doorstep. I've got some breaking news on that front, and my experience is on the ground up north in a minute. Before I do, I mentioned Stakelbeck Tonight. There's one more thing I have to mention to all of you that I think you're going to be excited about. We are launching a podcast. Yes, a podcast as well. Now, we have obviously daily, the newscast, the live stream here in the channel. This podcast is going to be different. It's called the Stackscast with Erick Stakelbeck. Hope you like the name. My nickname is Stacks. Podcast, you can be a little more personal, so we call it the Stackscast with Erick Stakelbeck. Our very first guest, and this will be posted on this channel next week, and also Spotify, all the podcast platforms. We've got big plans for it. My very first guest next week, and I preface this by saying the podcast and Stakelbeck Tonight will not always be Israel, Middle East related. We'll be broader. We'll get into other topics too, but all from a biblical perspective, pulling no punches. Bold, biblical, unapologetic. But sometimes, from time to time, we will feature people that with a faith angle, their testimony. One of my childhood heroes growing up in Philadelphia was a guy by the name of Hulk Hogan. Any old school wrestling fans out there from the 1980s, 1990s? When I was a young guy, I was into it. My dad took me to the matches at the old Philadelphia Spectrum, had a lot of fun with it. 1986, I saw Hulk Hogan wrestle King Kong Bundy at the Philadelphia Spectrum. Where am I going with all this? The one and only Hulk Hogan will be the inaugural guest on the Stackscast with Erick Stakelbeck, debuting next week, our brand new podcast. I went to Florida 2 weeks ago, sat down with the Hulkster, and heard his testimony. Why Hulk Hogan? Hey, folks, guess what? He just got baptized right around Christmas time, right before Christmas, in a very public profession of his faith. At the age of 70, Hulk Hogan, one of the most recognizable men in the world, gave his life to Jesus. I think that's a story worth reporting on. I think it's encouraging. I think it's incredible. So the Hulkster shared his testimony with me exclusively, and his journey of faith. It's an awesome story. We're going to debut it on the podcast, the Stackscast last week. It will also air on TBN. Praise, more coming there. But just a heads up there, and this podcast will be weekly. We've got some great guests of that caliber lined up, but a pretty good way to come out of the gates. Hulk Hogan, the first guest on the Stackscast with Erick Stakelbeck. So you're going to, I can speak today. You're going to want to see that next week. I can assure you it's going to inspire and encourage you. And you know what? I think a lot of people watching will say, Hulk Hogan gave his life to Jesus after living the rock star lifestyle for much of his life. Look, a famous guy, wealthy, obviously. Now Hulk Hogan at the age of 70 gave his life to Jesus. I think, and I told Hulk this, I think a lot of people watching are going to say, man, if he can do it, I can do it. Maybe I should give my life to Jesus. I'm so excited about it. That's coming next week. I want to announce that to all of our Watchman family here. Okay, last big takeaway from my Israel trip and the title, part of the title today of our newscast live stream, Hezbollah, the threat to the north. Okay, number one, here's the breaking news here. Today, one Israeli soldier killed, slaughtered, murdered by a Hezbollah rocket barrage. Hezbollah launched out of southern Lebanon a large barrage of rockets that struck the city of Sfat, S-A-F-E-D, but Israelis pronounce it Sfat. It looks like Safed, but Israelis say Sfat, in the upper Galilee region, a little deeper than Hezbollah had been firing, and that's troubling. One Israeli killed, at least 8 wounded. This comes on the heels of yesterday's Hamas rocket barrage against Kiryat Shimona in the north. A mother and her son, 47-year-old woman, her 15-year-old son, seriously wounded. That comes on the heels of Saturday and Sunday, 30 rocket barrages. Both days, at least 30 rockets fired at northern Israel. Folks, what I'm saying to you is this: it's intensifying. The Hezbollah attacks on Israel are intensifying, and Israel's responses are intensifying. Here's the numbers. Here's how Israel responded today. The IDF says, I'm just reading this right off my phone for you, quote, it completed a widespread wave of airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon in the wake of this killing today in Sfat. The IDF says it has completed a widespread wave of strikes, including some belonging to Hezbollah's elite Radwan force. Now, that Radwan force has been perched on Israel's northern border. The targets included buildings, command centers, and other infrastructure belonging to the terror group in a variety of cities and towns and villages in southern Lebanon. And what's noticeable, this piece says in the Times of Israel, these strikes are in towns deeper inside of Lebanon than Israel has usually been striking. So, folks, big takeaway here. Hezbollah is striking deeper into Israel, and people are being seriously wounded and killed. So Hezbollah strikes are going deeper, and the Israeli responses are going deeper as well. Folks, there's a collision course here. You know it if you're watching, and I know it because of what I saw last week. The Great Northern War is coming. No one wants to see it. It's going to be horrific. But there's no way Israel continued to function as a nation with this Hezbollah threat perched on its northern border. What did I feel last week when I was on that border? Folks, if you saw the newscast last Friday, You saw yesterday's newscast. We were in a closed military zone along that Lebanon border. We had exclusive access granted to us from the Israel Defense Forces. It's the only way we got in there. We were right on the border. We heard the explosions. There were rocket sirens going off right before, right after we left. This is real. And I have to tell you, the most tense, and look, I got the peace of the Lord. I don't have a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. I truly believe what the Bible says. I'm one of those crazy guys, I know, but I try to walk the walk and live out my faith. But I will tell you, it was tense to the north, and there's some nervousness. That is a tinderbox. I interviewed a mayor of Mate Asher, one of the large regions in the north. He's exasperated. Folks, 80,000 residents of northern Israel have been evacuated, and they don't know when they're going home. 80,000. Can you imagine what this does to the economy in northern Israel? But all those communities, over 30 of them along that Lebanon border, evacuated. I was in a hotel. If you missed yesterday's newscast, you can check it out right here in our archives. I interviewed a man who is from Metula, the northernmost town in Israel along the Lebanon border. He was in his home. Thank God he was in his safe room, his bomb shelter, basically inside his house. 2 anti-tank missiles fired by Hezbollah hit his house while he was inside, destroyed his house. He's got no home. He's a refugee in his own country. He's living in a hotel, living out of a suitcase in a hotel on the Sea of Galilee for the past month and a half, I believe. He doesn't know where he's going next. He and 80,000 other people. What I'm saying to you is this. Unless and until Hezbollah is dealt with and pushed back not 6 miles like France is suggesting and Europe is suggesting, but pushed back 20 miles or even better, destroyed as any sort of threat to Israel, Hezbollah. Until that happens, they ain't going home. Those residents of northern Israel, they're staying put. Would you go back if Hezbollah was still perched on your northern border, staring right at you across the border, seeing into your kitchen with every intention of duplicating or surpassing the carnage of October 7th, but only to the north? Of course you wouldn't. And those residents of the north can't go back until Hezbollah is dealt with. Where does that leave us? Well, France and the U.S., they're frantically trying to come up with a diplomatic solution, which I presume would involve the UN. Funny thing, actually sad and tragic thing about that, and pathetic thing, is that the UN in 2006, after the last Israel-Hezbollah war, was supposed to get this thing under control and make sure that Israel would be backed up from the, or I'm sorry, Hezbollah would be backed up miles and miles from the Israel border. Instead, right under the UN's noses, UNIFIL in particular, that's the agency there operating under the UN flag, Hezbollah did exactly that. They increased their presence on the border and increased exponentially the amount of rockets and missiles in their arsenal. Probably 200,000 at this point, pointed at every inch of Israel, and some of them are precision guided. Folks, there's no other way. Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah yesterday, the leader of Hezbollah, said, we're not backing up until the war in Gaza ends. Guess what? It may not end anytime soon. Fighting, even after Rafah and that operation, what's coming, fighting will continue. Israel is going to maintain a presence in Gaza. So Nasrallah is saying Hezbollah's attacks on Israel will essentially be open-ended. And guess what? If that's the case, then the residents, 80,000 of them, can't return north, and you basically don't have a northern Israel if that's the case. If no one lives there, you do the math. Anyone with a shred of common sense, and again, common sense not so common today, in the capitals of Europe and the United States would say, well, Israel's going, we have a troll, by the way, Gina Mini, Masamimi, Free Raif, Free Walid. Yeah, sorry, everyone. You deserve better than that trolls interrupting a great chat that I'm monitoring out of the corner of my eye. But I saw that troll throughout our live stream here. And finally, thank you. Our trusty producer, Daniel, showed him the door because Hey, guys and gals watching right now, you deserve better. This is an awesome chat going on, and I love it. I love interacting with you guys. You don't need some troll just causing trouble and trying to stir things up. Bye bye. But no one wants to see that Northern War. But this is a dose of cold, hard reality. And if you want someone to mince words, then this probably isn't the newscast for you. But if you want someone to give it to you straight, even when it's not pleasant and not easy on the ears, this is the place for you. For such a time as this, I think you'd rather know than not know, because I want you to pray, because prayer works. Israel's going to war against Hezbollah. I don't know when. I'm not a timetable setter, but things are getting to the point of no return. Not getting. They are there because the residents of northern Israel can't return to their homes. It's unsustainable, folks, this current situation. This is going to be exactly what I've been calling it for years now, the Great Northern War. Israel's going to have to take on Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Syria with healthy support Hezbollah would receive from the Iranian regime and other jihadist proxies there in the north. So it's coming. Prophetic implications, we talked about this yesterday, no doubt. I think this northern war could be a prelude to Isaiah 17 when Damascus is no more. Ezekiel 38 and 39, of course. A spark was lit on October 7th, an evil spark, a great evil was unleashed. It was already present, but it was taken to the nth degree. And I think what you're going to see in Lebanon is Israel ultimately prevailing, but in a very, very, very hard fight and more fights to come. No doubt. I'm not saying that to alarm you and to scare you and to worry you. I'm telling you that, number one, because this is what we do on this channel. We give you our take. Number two, man, if ever there was a time to pray and intercede and be an intercessor for Israel, for all that's good and true in the world, because look, no matter where you live, these evil forces eventually will find their way to you if you don't agree with them. They have a bullseye on the back of every non-radical jihadist in the world, does Hamas and Hezbollah, no doubt. Except the ones they can use for now as useful idiots like many in the global far left who we see marching in the streets against Israel. Prayer works. There's one thing I've learned in my life. I could share other stories of prayer working literally last week in Israel and amazing seeing God moving in his land. But stay optimistic, stay encouraged when everything's crashing. When the winds are roaring, the waves are crashing against the boat, your boat, the boat of your life, Jesus is in the boat with you. No doubt. What a comforting thought that you can head into the storm with the Savior of the world leading the way and going ahead of you. God will never leave you or forsake you. You're not to have a spirit of fear and of worry. Know what's going on, be cognizant of it, be aware of it. But this is an opportunity for us as believers to be light in the darkness. That's what we're going to do on this channel. In all the ventures we have, that as God expands our territory for such a time as this, Stakelbeck Tonight, the Stackscast podcast, the Watchman, all this stuff we're doing, we serve at the pleasure of the King, King Jesus. And it's not for my glory and my edification. Believe me, I'm just saying, all right, God, what do we do to get the message out for you? And we're going to keep doing that, letting him go ahead, and we're going to trust that God's going to make our path straight and make the way smooth, be a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. So don't be discouraged. Keep it right here. We're going to keep coming to you with real news and the truth, and know that you have a community here on the Watchman. When you're feeling down and you're feeling despondent, and we all get there sometimes, know that, you know how God said to Elijah was despondent. He was ready to end it all. He basically said, God, take me now. And God said, hey, the whole world's gone mad, Elijah essentially said. And God said, hey, I still have 7,000 who have not bent their knee to Baal. So remember, you've got about 875,000 here in this channel, close to 1 million, who are united. And we're going to do this together. And It's just for me an honor to walk through these prophetic times, these perilous but Bible times with you all. So thanks so much for joining us here today on The Watchman. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.